The tone is like your narrative attitude, your overall approach to the story. Hey guys, I'm Michelle. Welcome back to my channel. If writing workshops and traditional publishing talk are your thing, please consider subscribing. So today's writing workshop is all about tone. This topic was actually inspired by a comment way back on my video on first chapters. The comment was from Sherry, and she said, I spend a lot of time on my first few chapters making the classic mistake of rewriting every time I would work on my first draft. Unfortunately, I feel like the tone it set for the novel is all wrong now. The novel at the end is very different from what I started writing. The beginning feels like a cozy, when I was really aiming for a slightly creepy with a gothic feel without veering into melodrama. Maybe in the future you could address how to change or consciously infuse tone into your writing. This is such a great topic, and thank you, Sherry, for the idea. I love the specific example you provided of a cozy mystery versus like a dark gothic mystery. Mystery, fantasy, sci-fi, those are all genres, but they're all so broad. And as Sherry points out, a cozy mystery does not read like a creepy gothic. So the first thing I would suggest is that you think about the tone you're going for and come up with one word to describe it. Brooding, sarcastic, witty, charming, cynical. Spend a little time searching for that perfect word to describe the tone and the mood that you're trying to go for, and keep it in mind as you write. In fact, it might help you to write that word down on a sticky note and keep it somewhere close to your laptop or computer while you're working. The tone is like your narrative attitude. Obviously, your protagonist or narrator's mood and attitude might vary a little bit from scene to scene, or even vary a lot. But this is like your story's umbrella attitude. The overall outlook, the overall tone, your overall approach to the story. Let's stick with our mystery example that Sherry gave us earlier. How many mysteries are out there that start with a protagonist leaving the big city to go back to a small rural town where she may or may not have grown up, and she expects to find peace and quiet of a peaceful or boring nature, and instead finds herself dealing with murder? A whole lot. But is it a cozy mystery? Is it gothic horror? Is it psychological thriller? Every subgenre has its own distinct tone. So we're going to take a look at 3 passages from 3 published novels that all start with this same premise, but the novels are all in very different subgenres. How would you identify the tone for each of these? What words would you choose to describe the tone? Grab a pen and paper and jot down all the words you can think of to describe the tone as you listen to these passages. My mother's massive house is at the southernmost point of Wind Gap, the wealthy section, if you can count approximately 3 square blocks of town as a section. She lives in, and I once did too, an elaborate Victorian replete with a widow's walk, a wraparound veranda, a summer porch jutting toward the back, and a cupola arrowing out of the top. It's full of cubbyholes and nooks, curiously circuitous. The Victorians, especially Southern Victorians, needed a lot of room to stray away from each other, to duck tuberculosis and flu, to avoid rapacious lust, to wall themselves away from sticky emotions. Extra space is always good. The house is at the very top of a very steep hill. In first gear, you can drive up the cracked old driveway to the top, where a carriage porch keeps cars from getting wet. Or you can park at the bottom of the hill and walk the 63 stairs to the top, clutching the cigar-thin rail to the left. When I was a child, I always walked the stairs up, ran the driveway down. I assumed the rail was on the left side going up because I'm left-handed, and someone thought I might like that. Odd to think I ever indulged in such presumptions. It was a very pretty village, even by Cotswold standards. There were 2 long lines of houses interspersed with shops, some low and thatched, some warm gold brick with slate roofs. There was a pub called the Red Lion at one end and a church at the other. A few straggling streets ran off this one main road where cottages leaned together as if for support in their old age. The gardens were bright with cherry blossom, forsythia, and daffodils. There was an old-fashioned haberdasher's, a post office and a general store, and a butcher's, and a shop that seemed to sell nothing other than dried flowers, and to be hardly ever open. Outside the village and tucked away from view by a rise was a council estate, and between the council estate and the village proper was the police station, an elementary school, and a library. Agatha's cottage stood alone at the end of one of the straggling side streets. It looked like a cottage in one of the calendars she used to treasure as a girl. It was low and thatched, Norfolk reed, and with casement windows and built of the golden Cotswold stone. There was a small garden at the front and a long, narrow one at the back. Unlike practically everyone else in the Cotswolds, the previous owner had not been a gardener. There was little else but grass and depressing bushes of the hard-wearing kind found in public parks. The house loomed over them like a great, quiet gargoyle. It might have been foreboding, evoking images of ghosts and haunted places, if it had not seemed so tired. Slats missing from a couple of shutters, the ebony porch groaning as they made their way up the steps to the door, which came complete with a silver knocker shaped like a fist dangling from a circle. It's the abandoned shell of a snail, she told herself, and the thought of snails brought her back to her childhood, playing in the courtyard of their house, moving aside the potted plants and seeing the roly-poly scuttle about as they tried to hide again, or feeding sugar cubes to the ants despite her mother's admonishments. Also, the kind tabby, which slept under the bougainvillea and let itself be petted endlessly by the children. She did not imagine they had a cat in this house, nor canaries chirping merrily in their cages that she might feed in the mornings. All three of these protagonists are approaching houses, and all three of these houses are old, once beautiful, but maybe they have a few less than beautiful details as well. And they all evoke childhood memories in the protagonist. But the tones are very different from one passage to the next. Tone in writing is most frequently established through things like your verb choice, your adjective choice, your metaphors, your similes, and the imagery that you create. Say your narrator sees a bird flying in the sky. How does she describe it? Does the bird slice through the air, drift aimlessly on the wind current, soar toward the horizon? Slice, drift, and soar are three very different verb choices that change the image the reader conjures up of this bird in his mind. So which of those images best fits the mood of your story? Let's keep that in mind and break down what's going on in each of those three passages. The first passage is from Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, a psychological thriller that includes elements of horror. It's dark, gritty, and gruesome in places. This passage obviously isn't gruesome, but it definitely does not give off cozy mystery vibes. We've got sarcasm right off the bat. The wealthy section of this town is barely a section. The protagonist's mother is one of the few elite, and the protagonist is derisive in the way that she points that out. The protagonist offers a detached description of her childhood home with a few verb choices, jutting, arrowing, that are slightly violent, or at least they could be softer, but they're deliberately sharp. Cubbyholes and nooks and curiously circuitous evokes the idea of hidden secrets. The dark, gritty tone is particularly strong. Some narrators might romanticize the Victorians and their spacious homes, but this narrator takes it in the opposite direction. This house was built big, she tells us, so people could stray from one another, avoid deadly diseases and evil temptations. The phrase wall themselves away pushes the idea of isolation and personal distance, even from one's own family members. Sticky emotions, that's a very specific choice of adjective that emphasizes this whole idea even more. And the last paragraph offers us a few more highly specific details of this house, as well as more insight into the protagonist herself. She's reflecting on her naivete as a child and how strange she finds that now. Word choice is everything when it comes to tone. Keywords and phrases in this passage that evoke the right tone for this dark and twisted tale include widow's walk, jutting, arrowing, cubbyholes and nooks, curiously circuitous, stray, tuberculosis and flu, rapacious lust, sticky emotions, cracked old driveway, cigar-thin rail. The Quiche of Death by M.C. Beaton is a classic cozy mystery. A pub and a church, gardens bright with cherry blossoms, a shop that sells dried flowers. Everything about this first paragraph is, well, cozy. In particular, look at how the narrator describes a row of older cottages. They lean together as if for support in their old age. That's an absolutely charming way to describe tilting houses all crammed together, isn't it? Definitely not how the narrator in our first example would have described them. The protagonist's cottage reminds her of something from a calendar she treasured as a girl, again, very cozy, and that's despite the fact that this garden is rather depressing. There's no life in this cottage yet, but the protagonist attributes this issue not to the house, but to the previous owner. It's her house now, and she'll no doubt make it the idyllic home of her childhood dreams. As for word choice, we've got pretty village, warm gold brick, gardens bright with cherry blossom, forsythia and daffodils, tucked away from view, treasure, and golden Cotswold stone. But we do also have depressing and hard wearing, because this is a cozy mystery, and despite the sunshiny setting, there's gonna be a bit of murder. This last passage is from Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and as the title suggests, it's very much a Gothic horror. Comparing the house to a gargoyle instantly gives off the Gothic vibe. We've got a mention of ghosts, the shutters are missing slats, the ebony porch groans, the dangling fist door knocker is more than a little grotesque, and the image of an abandoned snail shell isn't exactly cozy. The protagonist recalls fond memories of her own childhood, but contrasts that home with this house, in which living things described as kind and merry cannot possibly dwell. Once again, when you examine the word choices, quiet gargoyle, foreboding, ghosts and haunted places, slats missing, ebony porch groaning, fist dangling, abandoned shell of a snail, the tone is decidedly Gothic, creepy, and dark. So today's writing workshop activity is you are going to choose a passage either from a book you're working on if you like, or from a published novel that you enjoy, and examine it the way we just did with these 3 passages and identify the tone. Make a list of all of the word and phrase choices that the author made in this passage that you feel contributed to creating this tone. Then, if you really want a challenge, take that passage and rewrite it and attempt to evoke a completely different tone. That's it for this video. If you found this helpful, I would appreciate it if you hit that like button and maybe share a link of this video with a writer you know that might find it helpful too. I will see you guys on Friday with another vlog, and until then, keep writing.